Hello and welcome. My name is Charlie Knox, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Wolverine Pharmaceuticals. Today, we'll be presenting our product development plan for our new monoclonal antibody designed to target and inhibit interleukin-5, a key inflammatory mediator of eosinophilic asthma. Today's agenda is as follows. I'll give a brief introduction on eosinophilic asthma and our company culture. Then I'll pass it on to our executive leadership team, who will present the key functional areas important for getting a new pharmaceutical developed and approved. Throughout this presentation, we'll also highlight the value of industry pharmacists within each of those functional areas. Eosinophilic asthma is a subset of severe asthma, which affects 5 to 10% of all asthma patients. We decided to create a new monoclonal antibody for eosinophilic asthma because it is a severe form of asthma and it greatly affects our pediatric population. In addition, we identified 3 current therapy shortcomings that we decided to take advantage of, those being administration, efficacy, and costs of the current interleukin-5 inhibitors. That brings us to our solution, RYAIRA, generic name actlizumab. As I've mentioned before, RYAIRA is a humanized monoclonal antibody designed to target and inhibit interleukin-5. We have demonstrated that RYAIRA has preclinical safety, and we intend to bring RYAIRA to clinical trials with the intention of it getting FDA approved for eosinophilic asthma. Before going further with this presentation, outlining the clinical development, regulatory strategy, medical strategy, and commercial plan for RYAIRA, I'd like to first talk about who we are at Wolverine Pharmaceuticals. Wolverine Pharmaceuticals is dedicated to developing innovative therapies to tackle some of the most complex of diseases with these core tenets in mind: patients first, accessible medication, and passion. At Wolverine Pharmaceuticals, we love science and developing new therapies. However, we must always keep the patient's interests in mind first. Our work is defined by these values: respect, dignity, diversity, compassion, commitment, inclusion, and excellence. Here is our executive leadership team. Each one will present a functional area important for getting RYAIRA developed and approved.
Hello, my name is Seth Rice, and I'm the Chief Scientific Officer at Wolverine Pharmaceuticals. Over the next several slides, I'll be discussing the clinical development process of actlizumab, including its medical uses, clinical trials, other potential indications for use, and challenges faced along the way. The primary indication sought for actlizumab is eosinophilic asthma, a subphenotype of asthma characterized by high levels of eosinophils in the airway lumen identified via sputum cell counts. Options for pharmacologic therapy are limited in these patients, as many experience uncontrolled asthma symptoms while attempting to manage them using inhaled corticosteroids plus an additional controller medication, such as a long-acting beta-2 agonist. Respiratory eosinophilic inflammation is connected to disease severity and asthma exacerbation frequency. Interleukin-5 is a cytokine produced by helper T lymphocytes and is key in eosinophilic maturation, activation, migration, and survival. The role of the IL-5 in eosinophilic asthma makes it an effective target in pharmacological treatment. What makes actlizumab such an attractive therapeutic option for clinicians and for patients with eosinophilic asthma as compared to other IL-5 inhibitors is its extended interval between dosing. The brilliant and creative scientists on our clinical development team were able to extend the half-life of actlizumab by inserting 2 point mutations in the Fc region of the monoclonal antibody. This region binds with the neonatal Fc receptor in vivo and plays a crucial role in the process responsible for the antibody's elimination. The inserted point mutations resulted in a subsequent increased binding affinity between the Fc region of actlizumab and the neonatal Fc receptor, ultimately increasing its half-life. This phenomenon was demonstrated in our preclinical trials and then in human use during clinical trials. In addition to the extended half-life, a second advantage actlizumab poses clinically is the expected pediatric indication for children with eosinophilic asthma ages 6 and older. We are actively pursuing this indication with the promising results of our phase 2 PACE trial, which will be discussed shortly. We are confident that the safety, tolerability, and efficacy data support the use of actlizumab in this population, offering much-needed relief to children with eosinophilic asthma. The third advantage is the demonstrated enhanced efficacy over another anti-IL-5 monoclonal antibody. Our journey with actlizumab began right here in Ann Arbor, with over 4 years of preclinical studies spanning between January 2010 to April 2014. In May, we were approved for use of actlizumab in human trials and started our phase 1 study, which completed early the following year. In March 2015, we initiated our adult phase 2 trial, and in April 2016 began our pediatrics phase 2 trial. The adult phase 2 trial was completed July 2017, and a month later we launched our phase 3 trial, which completed in January 2021. We expect actlizumab to receive FDA approval by December 2021, when we can begin phase 4 surveillance studies. Our phase 1E study was a double-blinded trial aimed to establish efficacy as well as pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamic profiles in adult patients with eosinophilic asthma. This study randomized 40 patients aged 18 to 65 with eosinophilic asthma to receive either 0.25 milligrams per kilogram IV, 5 milligrams subcutaneous, 50 milligrams subcutaneous, a placebo IV, or a placebo subcutaneous injection once every 8 weeks for 24 weeks. We evaluated the notable adverse effects and toxicities, pharmacokinetic parameters such as half-life, subcutaneous bioavailability, and other important pharmacokinetic parameters, as well as pharmacodynamic activity by measuring eosinophil levels from baseline. No severe adverse events were reported, with transient reductions in white blood cells, increase in CPK, and nasopharyngitis as the most common. As we had expected, the mean half-life was relatively high at 32 days. Additionally, actlizumab was able to show persistent eosinophil depletion between day 7 and the end of the study in 96% of the patients. Overall, actlizumab was well tolerated and demonstrated pharmacodynamic activity with eosinophil depletion and prolonged half-life. The phase 2 ASAP study was a double-blinded study designed to display efficacy in reducing severe asthmatic events and displaying safety and tolerability in a larger patient population. 295 patients aged 12 to 65 with eosinophilic asthma were randomized to receive 5, 25, or 50 milligrams of actlizumab subcutaneously, or a subcutaneous placebo. The primary endpoint was the number of asthma exacerbations per year, and the secondary outcomes included the mean change in pre-bronchodilator forced expiratory volume in 1 second, or FEV1, from baseline over the course of the trial, and the percent of patients experiencing adverse events. The 25 milligram treatment was superior. There were 0.9 exacerbations per year in the 5 milligram group, 0.76 in the 25 milligram group, 0.82 in the 50 milligram group, and 2.5 per year in patients receiving placebo. The 25 milligram actlizumab dose was also superior in the secondary outcome of mean change in FEV1 from baseline, and all active treatments showed adequate safety and tolerability data. Overall, this data supported 25 milligrams as the most efficacious and preferable regimen while displaying adequate safety data. The objective of the PACE study was to investigate the safety, pharmacokinetic, and pharmacodynamic profile of actlizumab in pediatric patients with eosinophilic asthma. This was an open-label study with 45 pediatric patients ages 6 through 11 receiving 25 milligram doses every 8 weeks if weighing over 40 kilograms, and 10 milligram doses with the same dosing schedule if weighing under 40 kilograms. Notable endpoints examined were the number of patients with serious adverse effects, half-life, and other important pharmacokinetic parameters, and the ratio to baseline in eosinophil count at week 24. 12% of patients receiving 25 milligram doses and 8% of children receiving 10 milligram doses reported a serious adverse event. The mean half-life was extended in the pediatric population as well, at 31.6 hours. Efficacy was supported with a ratio to baseline in eosinophil count at week 24 of 0.105 in the 25 milligram group and 0.096 in the 10 milligram group. This study showed that actlizumab is safe in children and efficacious in reducing eosinophil counts in pediatric populations. Our phase 3 PEACE trial aimed to evaluate the efficacy of actlizumab compared to mepolizumab. The double-blinded trial randomized 688 patients aged 12 through 65 with eosinophilic asthma to receive 25 milligrams of actlizumab subcutaneously, alternating with placebo every 4 weeks to maintain the blind, or mepolizumab subcutaneously every 4 weeks. The primary endpoint of this study was the mean change from baseline in the St. George's Respiratory Questionnaire at week 32. The secondary endpoints included mean change from baseline in FEV1 at week 32 and the mean change from baseline in the Asthma Control Questionnaire 5 at week 32. Actlizumab displayed a mean change in the SGRQ from baseline of minus 18.6 compared to mepolizumab at minus 15.4. The mean change of the FEV1 from baseline in the actlizumab group was 182 milliliters as compared to 174 milliliters with mepolizumab. The mean change of the ACQ-5 from baseline with actlizumab was 0.86 and zero point 0.0 with mepolizumab. Overall, actlizumab showed a significant advantage over mepolizumab in the primary and major secondary endpoints. In addition to seeking an indication for use of actlizumab in patients with eosinophilic asthma, there are other indications we will consider pursuing for approval. These IL-5 mediated pathologies are characterized by elevated levels of eosinophilic involvement and can be reasonably treated with an IL-5 inhibitor. The next 5 indications we plan to pursue are eosinophilic esophagitis, hypereosinophilic syndrome, Churg-Strauss syndrome, atopic dermatitis, and nasal polyposis. The clinically advantageous dosing schedule and half-life, as well as the pediatric indication, will make actlizumab an attractive option for these alternative indications as well. Engagement and collaboration with regulatory and medical affairs is a crucial component of our clinical development process. The clinical development team worked closely with regulatory affairs to facilitate communication with the FDA for feedback regarding optimal trial design and regulatory compliance throughout each of our clinical trials. Proactive communication with the FDA reduced the number of unnecessary regulatory delays for a more time-effective approval process. Additionally, a regulatory affairs representative was involved in all high-level clinical development planning meetings from the pre-IND meeting forward. Medical affairs assisted clinical development in all phases of clinical trial design and planning, gathering insights from prominent experts in the field regarding which specific efficacy, safety, pharmacokinetic, and surrogate endpoints were most relevant to investigate. Clinical development will assist medical affairs in communicating clinical trial results to providers, payers, and other stakeholders, and help answer questions and make clarifications with the proper dissemination of clinical data upon inquiry. Lastly, clinical development will assist medical affairs with the publication of clinical trial results. Pharmacist education and clinical experience make them an essential component of our clinical team. As formally trained, doctorate-level medication experts, pharmacists offer a unique perspective that contributes to success as a clinical scientist. Pharmacists regularly refer to literature to understand how to provide optimal, evidence-based pharmacotherapies for their patients. They are trained experts in analyzing clinical data, knowledge that translates fittingly to clinical trial design and conduction. Through their clinical training and experience, pharmacists can anticipate relevant, class-specific side effects and drug-drug interactions, and designate important safety and efficacy monitoring parameters that must be analyzed in clinical trials. Trained interaction with patients provides pharmacists with insight on barriers that patients face that may obstruct them from successful therapies, such as lack of adherence. These barriers can be addressed during clinical development by taking advantage of more convenient and preferential dosing delivery and medication regimens. Lastly, pharmacists understand how to work in many diverse roles as parts of a healthcare team and can provide insights as to what characteristics of a drug product make its handling, preparation, and dispensing feasible in a healthcare setting.
Hello, my name is Belma Samiri, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Wolverine Pharmaceuticals. I will be introducing you to the regulatory strategy developed for the approval of actlizumab for the indication of severe asthma with eosinophilic phenotypes in patients aged 12 to 65 with use in certain populations of pediatric patients aged 6 to 11. This is a simplified view of the clinical development timeline for actlizumab. The regulatory affairs team has worked closely with the clinical development team to ensure that we provide the FDA with data that favors human clinical trials with appropriate pharmacokinetic and safety profiles for the approval of a novel biologic entity. As a regulatory team, our key focus during the preparation for IND submission was to provide the FDA data that favored human clinical trials by submitting the appropriate pharmacokinetic and safety profiles for the approval of a novel biologic entity. Our end goal is the approval of actlizumab for the indication of severe asthma with eosinophilic phenotype in patients aged 12 to 65 with use in the certain populations of pediatric patients aged 6 to 11. The regulatory project manager contacted our division contact at the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research to reach an agreement on the date and time of the pre-IND meeting, as is protocol with all our FDA meetings. To the right, you can see an example of the information a typical meeting request includes. We submitted a pre-IND meeting package to the FDA in February of 2014. The package contained data from animal studies, including toxicology and reproductive studies in multiple animal models. It also contained the proposed clinical protocol for phase 1, 2, and 3 studies. At the pre-IND meeting with the Center of Drug Evaluation and Research in March of 2014, we discussed the chemistry, manufacturing, and controls data along with the phase 1 protocol. We reviewed the official meeting notes in April and had no further comments. We followed up with the items requested of us and submitted the IND for actlizumab in August of 2014. After the 30-day hold for FDA review, the IND became active in October of the same year. This is a list of the components that were included in the IND package that was submitted in August of 2014. As can be seen, the IND is an intensive document to compile, so many teams play an integral part of the process to finalize the package. After completion of the phase 1 clinical studies, the end of phase 1 meeting was scheduled with the Center of Drug Evaluation and Research for January of 2015. During this meeting, we discussed the proposed phase 2 protocol, identification of the population for phase 3, and the analysis of the PK and PD results. Our team expressed the intent to submit a waiver for patients less than 6 years of age and deferral for extensive studies with actlizumab for patients less than 12 years of age. The official meeting notes received in February of 2015 reiterated the need for the submission of an initial pediatric study plan before trials were conducted in a pediatric population. The initial pediatric study plan was submitted in October of 2015, and the reviewed pediatric study plan was received from the Pediatric Review Committee in January of 2016. The regulatory project manager procured a Type C meeting to be held in February with the Pediatric Review Committee to discuss the pediatric study plan. The Pediatric Review Committee agreed with the plans for the pediatric study. The pediatric study plan was submitted in March of the same year, and confirmation of agreement received in April. I'll be showing you an excerpt of the pediatric study plan on the next slide. This is the general format of the pediatric study plan. In the pediatric study plan, we express the intent to obtain a waiver for patients less than 6 years of age and deferral for studies with actlizumab for asthma for patients less than 12 years of age. The pediatric data was supported by the referencing of the mepolizumab approval for pediatric populations less than 12 years of age due to an insufficient population having eosinophilic asthma for a powered study. In addition, we outlined our plan to conduct phase 2 open label studies on pediatric patients from the ages of 6 to 11 years of age. Along with the reference data, we plan to extrapolate data from the aforementioned PACE trials of 45 patients aged 6 to 11 years of age. Since our global regulatory affairs team plans to seek approval in the European market as well, we included our EMA application number in the pediatric study plan. During the end of phase 2A meeting in July 2017, we expressed our intent to pursue a priority review for actlizumab based on preliminary data indicating improved effectiveness of actlizumab. We discussed the selection of the dosing regimen for phase 2B and phase 3 in the design of our dose response trials. We also raised concerns about the necessity of a meeting with the Pulmonary Allergy Drugs Advisory Committee to discuss the current indication for eosinophilic asthma and the additional indications mentioned earlier in the presentation. In addition, we determined the safety of proceeding to phase 3 based on the ASAP trial results and evaluated the phase 3 plans and protocols. The official meeting notice did not require any follow-up, and the next Type B meeting was the end of phase 2B meeting that occurred in November of 2017. During this meeting, we reiterated our intent to pursue a priority review for actlizumab, and were told that the data so far was supportive of that expedient pathway. At our most recent Type B meeting with the Pulmonary Allergy Drug Advisory Committee earlier this month, we discussed our target population based on the results of the EAST, ASAP, and PACE trials. The committee voted positively for the use in adolescents, which we see as a great development for patients in that population affected by eosinophilic asthma. Currently, based on the results of the pivotal phase 3 PEACE trial and favorable PK/PD data in the EAST, ASAP, PACE, and PEACE trials, we are optimistic that actlizumab will qualify for priority review. Our regulatory team maintains that actlizumab has clinical data that demonstrates increased effectiveness in the treatment of eosinophilic asthma. Namely, the clinically significant improvements in the mean change from base in the St. George's Respiratory Questionnaire, the mean change from baseline in FEV1, and the mean change in ACQ-5 that were mentioned earlier in the presentation by Seth, our Chief Scientific Officer. We will discuss this again with the FDA in the upcoming pre-BLA meeting to record in March of 2021. During that meeting, we will also discuss our risk evaluation and mitigation management plan, which includes a pregnancy registry and continued post-market surveillance. This is a simplified representation of the interactions the regulatory team has had with the FDA during the process of gaining approval for actlizumab. Our team is now focused on the development of the regulatory strategy for actlizumab post-BLA submission. The timeline above is our projected timeline for approval of the BLA based on the rejection or acceptance of the priority review. Here at Wolverine Pharmaceuticals, we have many pharmacists that contribute heavily to our regulatory affairs team. Pharmacists have an advantage in regards to pharmacovigilance or quality improvement over other regulatory affairs professionals because of their knowledge about the process of drug development. Because they have more experience in clinical practice, they bring a better understanding of the disease states and what types of improvements are clinically significant in studies. In addition, pharmacists join our team with previous clinical knowledge of disease states, making the learning curve much lower for them when that type of information is needed in regulatory application. Additionally, pharmacists have an advantage when assuring that the company is updated on regulatory changes. Pharmacists often display the flexibility to keep up with the constantly changing guidelines. This can be attributed to past experience learning new clinical guidelines throughout their educations. In the area of regulatory affairs that is concerned with advertising, labeling, and promotion, pharmacists have an advantage over their regulatory affairs professional colleagues because they understand the science behind the benefit-risk analysis and the claims that we are allowed to make on the label. Because they have a foundation in evidence-based medicine, it is not as difficult for them to ascertain the importance of the veracity of our labeling statements. Along those lines, pharmacists also understand the importance of language and wording when educating patients. They often notice when language we are using to promote our product is not supported by the scientific evidence available to us. Our regulatory team has valued the input of our pharmacist team members during the development of our regulatory strategy for actlizumab.
My name is Sarah Casberry, and as the Scientific Associate Director, it was my responsibility to take on the challenge point. For the challenge point, Wolverine Pharmaceuticals plans to adapt our phase 3 trial in a few different ways. Firstly, in clinical development, we plan to continue to collect patients' FEV1 data by allowing them to measure FEV1 at home using a masterscope. Masterscope is an at-home spirometer created by ERT specifically for data collection and diagnoses. Next, we plan to collect ACQ5 and SGRQ questionnaires through virtual e-visits instead of in-person appointments. Lastly, through regulatory affairs, we plan to utilize the fast-track FDA approval due to the increased risk for severe illness from COVID-19 in asthma patients.
I'm Melanie Wong, and I'm the Chief Medical Officer at Wolverine Pharmaceuticals. Our department's objective is to bridge our pharmaceutical company to the wider medical community by providing scientific and clinical support about our new biologic entity, RYAIRA. By leveraging our relationships with medical experts studying asthmatic disorders, we will be able to successfully bring our product to launch in this competitive landscape. Our medical affairs team will be composed of several professionals from different disciplines. With their robust clinical and scientific backgrounds, pharmacists play a key role in leveraging their therapeutic knowledge of various disease states and understanding how treatment guidelines affect patient outcomes. We will have specialists in various domains of medical affairs on our team, including those working in medical communications, medical publications, and medical information. The medical communications specialists will ensure clinical trial data from our investigational drug aligns with the key safety and efficacy findings we may present at meetings. They will also be responsible for directing and planning drug-related publications, such as manuscripts, abstracts, and posters related to novel findings of our new drug. The medical publications specialist will work closely with medical communications to produce editorials, slide decks, and other materials highlighting the major findings from the clinical trial data. They will also appraise scientific literature to see how our investigational drug compares with other therapeutic agents currently on the market for the treatment of eosinophilic asthma. Medical information specialists will have multiple duties, including providing drug safety and efficacy information about our drug to consumers and healthcare providers, providing trainings for medical science liaisons on the on versus off-label uses of this drug, as well as reviewing promotional materials to ensure all information on the drug is accurate and backed by scientific findings. Medical science liaisons specializing in the area of pulmonology will be able to leverage scientific relationships with key opinion leaders and provide information about our investigational drug in its late phase clinical studies. They will also be able to discuss off-label uses of the drug and provide the latest research and developments associated with it as it progresses through the phases of clinical development. Specialists involved with health economic outcomes research would also be valuable assets on our medical affairs team, as they're able to utilize various pharmacoeconomic models to evaluate the cost and effectiveness of our drug compared to alternatives on the market. Lastly, having a clinical values and outcomes liaison will also be beneficial on our team, as they will be able to collect insights that help advance the development of the RYAIRA portfolio, while also implementing strategies to meet the needs of a dynamic customer base. The clinical values and outcomes liaison will also collaborate with cross-functional teams to interpret medical and payer value evidence across the portfolio of our new drug. Internal stakeholders, including the board of directors, managers, and sales representatives, will receive information on the pharmacotherapeutic effects of interleukin-5 antagonist humanized monoclonal antibodies for the treatment of eosinophilic asthma, as well as the pathogenesis of the disease. We will provide them with background trainings on the disease state, as well as the current therapies that are being used to treat this condition in order to highlight the shortcomings of these treatments. We will provide education on the mechanism of action of RYAIRA, as well as any preclinical pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamic data available from our trials. We will also illustrate the aspects that differentiate RYAIRA from similar medications on the market by emphasizing our drug's innovative formulation that confers a superior pharmacodynamic, pharmacokinetic, safety, and efficacy profile. Our team will also provide an overview of the competitive landscape of therapeutic agents being developed for eosinophilic asthma in order to gauge a product development timeline that coincides with our competitors. Furthermore, looking into clinical trials that are also investigating the use of IL-5 antagonist humanized monoclonal antibodies in eosinophilic asthma will provide our team with a framework for product launch. Examining key pivotal trials from historical studies, as well as competitor trials, will allow our team to see how the trajectory of our drug development aligns to others. Lastly, we will provide our internal stakeholders with training on the on versus off-label uses of our drug to highlight the various indications it may be used for. To set RYAIRA apart from others, we are aiming to highlight its clinical superiority compared to similar agents on the market, which will put us on the path to a successful product launch. When deciding on the timeline for dissemination of medical information to our external stakeholders, including patient advocates, payers, physicians, and other healthcare providers, it is important to balance the benefits and risks of data sharing, as well as public trust or transparency and patient confidentiality. Prior to initiation of our phase 1 trial, data on registration elements and the data sharing plan should be released. This should include all inclusion and exclusion criteria, primary and secondary hypotheses, outcomes, methods, and study design. Safety and efficacy data from phase 2 trials should be released upon completion in order to show the medication's potential benefit for our target population. Once phase 3 is complete, a culmination of our findings and a lay language summary should be available for our external stakeholders for review. This data should be released around the time large asthma conferences take place in order to generate buzz for this new drug on the market. After FDA approval, data on adverse drug reactions and events will be monitored and released to our stakeholders as the drug continues through the post-marketing phase. The Food and Drug Administration is responsible for determining if a drug is safe and effective for an intended use. Once the FDA approves a drug for a particular disease state, healthcare providers may prescribe the drug for an unapproved use when they judge that it is medically appropriate for their patient. Therefore, off-label information should be available to physicians for their use, and medical science liaisons may provide this information to them if prompted. For example, our drug RYAIRA is an interleukin-5 antagonist humanized monoclonal antibody indicated for the treatment of eosinophilic asthma. Due to its ability to decrease eosinophil levels, this drug could also be used off-label to treat primary hypereosinophilic syndrome. Our key opinion leaders will be comprised of medical professionals with experience working with asthmatic disorders or the pediatric population. Their portfolios show extensive experience in clinical research, publications, and involvement with advocacy groups, which will help our team to ensure RYAIRA will be successful in this competitive landscape. We will have our team of medical science liaisons meet with these key opinion leaders to discuss key safety and efficacy points derived from our trials, as well as educational and promotional material about our new drug. Our medical affairs team may be consulted at various points throughout the drug development process to review data and educational materials about RYAIRA. During the preclinical phase, our team may be called upon to conduct literature reviews and provide details on the existing market for drugs in the treatment of eosinophilic asthma. During phases 1 through 3 of clinical development, medical affairs may be contacted to share pivotal results on the key safety, efficacy, and toxicology data, which may later be disseminated to our stakeholders. Upon FDA review, our team will be reviewing all the educational, technical, and promotional materials for RYAIRA, which may include slide decks, posters, and publications to ensure they adhere to the guidelines set out by the FDA. Lastly, it is the duty of the medical affairs team to continue providing educational support on RYAIRA, as well as the therapeutic landscape of eosinophilic asthma post-marketing. In the past, positions within medical affairs were traditionally held by physicians. However, there has been a shift of medical affairs positions being held by an increasing number of pharmacists. As pharmacy education has evolved over time, pharmacists have become more vital to the pharmaceutical industry due to their robust expertise in clinical drug use. Pharmacists within medical affairs have a fundamental understanding of the drug development process and are able to interpret key findings throughout the various phases for dissemination. They also have extensive knowledge of drug safety and efficacy and are able to translate clinical trial findings into a form that is digestible for stakeholders and key opinion leaders. Pharmacists' expertise in evaluating scientific literature and employing evidence-based medicine practices is another crucial skill that lends to the success of developing a new drug. Pharmacists are also able to continuously leverage their clinical knowledge of medications and disease states and apply them to an industrial setting where these skills are imperative in drug development. Finally, pharmacists within medical affairs are able to provide clinical data that guides evidence-based decision-making when it comes to selecting the optimal therapeutic agents to treat patients. As pharmacy education continues to advance, the value of pharmacists in the pharmaceutical industry will also expand.
Hello, my name is Garrett Flowers. I am the Chief Strategy Officer for Wolverine Pharmaceuticals, and I'll be discussing the commercialization and marketing as it pertains to the launch of RYAIRA. Our marketing team's main objectives are as follows: filling the market gaps with research, creation of a successful commercialized strategy, and to highlight the brand's benefits and maximization. First, a quick review of the competitive landscape. RYAIRA has 3 major competitors, of which are humanized monoclonal antibodies for blocking interleukin-5 activity. The first, Fasenra, is an interleukin-5 receptor blocker costing about $4,700 every 2 months. The other 2, Nucala and Sinclair, are interleukin-5 antagonists costing $2,800 and $2,500 every month, respectively. All are approved for ages 12 and older, excluding Sinclair, which is for 18 and up. The 3 are only approved as adjunctive therapies in severe asthma with eosinophilic phenotype. Our marketing team will take a research-based approach to fill the market gaps. We'll analyze quality-adjusted life years of our product and the competitors to perform a cost utilization evaluation. We will consider a cost-benefit analysis to provide more insight into the superiority of our treatments, and results will be used to support the addition of our product to different formularies. Secondly, costs associated with subcutaneous versus intravenous administration will be assessed, as our competitor Sinclair could bear more administration cost burden due to the intravenous dosing. Third, we'll gather data on number of eosinophilic asthma patients in the United States, then perform an analysis report on symptoms in the treated versus untreated and compare the regimens in the treated populations. These results will be used to convey the market need for our product. Finally, we'll find specific case studies for which our competition was used in pediatric cases, as there is no pediatric approval for EA. Findings would be used to aid the safety comparisons of our products to our competitors. Next, we'll discuss the development of our brand strategy. First, we'll define our primary target audience, which was patients with severe eosinophilic asthma and need to maintain a lifestyle in which they are able to participate in all desired activities without exacerbating their asthma, with an emphasis in the pediatric populations. Furthermore, patients will need a treatment that is affordable, renders a low treatment burden, and has minimal side effects as to not hinder their quality of life. As for providers, they will be pursuing a trustworthy treatment method that will be effective with minimal adverse effects, high compliance rate, minimal drug-drug interactions, and a high safety profile. As for payers, they'll be seeking an effective treatment that is at low cost and prevents future costs related to EA conditions of patients, such as hospitalizations or more provider visits. Customer insight will drive our brand's strategy. We will utilize patient-reported outcome surveys to characterize health-related quality of life, satisfaction with treatment, symptoms assessment, compliance and adherence, and financial burden. The core messages we want to send to patients, providers, and payers is that RYAIRA reduces the amount of asthmatic exacerbations in patients with severe EA in a safe and effective way, especially in pediatrics. We wish to show that RYAIRA patients that previously were restricted by their AAA will be able to maintain their health enough to participate in activities that they love doing without exacerbating their condition. Along with being able to participate in activities, our team wants to demonstrate that taking RYAIRA will not hinder one's lifestyle because it can be administered without having to go to a healthcare facility. This moves us into our product positioning statement: live a healthy life with RYAIRA, an effective treatment for reducing eosinophilic asthma in all ages. To deliver our message, we have developed a 3-tiered marketing approach for advertising to patients. The marketing of RYAIRA to patients will be through various platforms such as social media, television, and printed materials. The first tier of marketing will focus on social media platforms. This is where most of the funding will be allocated. More on tier 1 next. The second tier of marketing will be utilizing television commercials, specifically during primetime news segments and high viewership sporting events. Lastly, the third tier, which will receive the least funding, will be utilizing printed material such as newspapers, magazines, advertisements, to reach the population that does not frequently use technology. The emphasis on social media will be used to target pediatric and younger populations, and the TV adverts will target the parents. Now to take a look into our tier 1 marketing strategy. We are a company focused on adopting social media trends. These are powerful marketing tools that can reach millions of views globally. Some of these platforms include Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. One interesting idea we have about the use of TikTok is with the massive rise in viewership and these viral trends and challenges, we are interested in utilizing TikTok to show RYAIRA patients they are still able to participate in various trends without EA inhibiting them. The marketing of RYAIRA to prescribers will be through various mediums, such as conferences, presentations, and printed materials. The first tier of marketing will be in-person or virtual conferences with healthcare providers. Utilizing office visits will be the second tier approach to marketing, especially targeting pediatric clinics, hospitals, and practices. Lastly, using advertisements in scientific journals will be the third marketing strategy, specifically targeting pediatric and the respiratory fields. All information will be cited for prescribers' own references. We will take a different approach to market RYAIRA to payers. We will provide extensive research on the efficacy and cost benefit over our competition. We will support our claims with the market research that we defined earlier. Now to define the market size and outreach. There are about 25 million Americans that suffer from asthma, of which 1.25 million suffer from EA. With an annual cost of treatment for our competition around $31,000, our goal is to price at or below $25,000 to give our patients an annualized average savings of 20% or more. At Wolverine Pharmaceuticals, we are committed to reducing treatment barriers. So we have global and domestic partnerships with various organizations to ensure that no one goes without treatment and no cost is an issue. Our marketing team has developed a dynamic system for our sales team to communicate our message with payers, providers, and patients. The material distributed for communication with payers and providers will include brochures, informatics, instructional videos, and commercials of sample sales pitches. The instructional videos will portray information such as what RYAIRA does, how it works, and how to use the medication. These video segments will be engaging and act as accessible resources for payers, providers, and patients to continuously reference. The videos will be available to the public on websites for our drug product, along with electronic versions of the brochures and infograms. To ensure that our message is clearly communicated, we will host virtual Q&A sessions with both our marketing team and our research and development team for providers and payers to inquire about our product. We also want to ensure pharmacists can utilize our materials to assess medication use and fix any adherence issues that may arise. The materials will also be additional supportive information to payers for coverage determination of RYAIRA. Our landscape-based medical education approach will target children's hospitals and academic medical centers to familiarize pediatricians, asthma specialists, and other future providers with our drug. Our sales team will provide the same marketing material as previously mentioned, but they'll also have complete research data and a detailed training information. Industry pharmacists play a vital role on the marketing team because of their extensive clinical expertise. Their knowledge allows patient-centered marketing approach by communicating clinical and research data into patient-friendly language. They maintain connections with key opinion leaders and work interprofessionally on formulary decisions. Pharmacists are responsible for providing educational material to patients, payers, and providers. Lastly, they ensure the clinical accuracy of data that is being marketed. Overall, a pharmacist is uniquely positioned in marketing to bridge the gaps between scientific information, patient-centered care, and the monetization of a new drug product.
Hello, my name is Eduardo Legaspi, and I am the president and co-founder of Wolverine Pharmaceuticals. During our presentation, I hope that we have conveyed to you the importance that a pharmacist can play in every facet of drug development and production. Furthermore, we learned that pharmacists can play different roles within the pharmaceutical industry. Our clinical background provides a great base that has an immediate impact on drug development processes, as well as on-the-job training to function in non-clinical roles. As a majority of pharmacy school is honoring our clinical skills, capitalizing on opportunities to gather non-clinical skills can further pharmacists' roles in areas such as commercial roles and clinical development. As many companies are looking for patient-centric models, pharmacists will play a key role. With that being said, my team and I believe pharmacists could still play even a bigger role in drug development and commercialization. Pharmacists already tend to be members of research teams and bring a unique perspective to drug development. Training in pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, and drug safety is a much heavier emphasis in a pharmacist's training than other professionals in the pharmaceutical industry. This means that a pharmacist's drug-related knowledge and patient-centric skill set is specialized to medications, but broad enough to understand how drug products are dosed, administered, and monitored in patient populations. The pharmacist's role can be expanded in drug development when one can apply knowledge in pharmaceutics and medicinal chemistry to the discovery, development, and formulation of drug products, as well as the clinical expertise necessary to monitor patients on site during clinical trials. Pharmacists are data-driven and taught to make choices based on evidence. Therefore, a pharmacist is an ideal researcher in the development of drug products as well as the management of clinical trials. Unlike many professionals with marketing or legal training that are involved in the commercialization of drug products, pharmacists possess a deeper understanding of medications and the patients who use them. A pharmacist's abilities as communicators can shine when developing content on medications for campaigns targeting clinicians and patients. Pharmacists can adjust to any audience's health knowledge in order to communicate medical information in ways that tell a story and convey scientific information. Finally, larger roles in commercialization for pharmacists to serve as the creative leadership in advertising, medical content developers in educational materials, and strategic directors in communications. Pharmacists are valued for both their clinical knowledge and problem-solving abilities. A pharmacist education is based on looking at patient cases and trying to figure out the best treatment. This style of problem solving is especially useful in the pharmaceutical industry when helping to determine the value of a new medication. When you are looking at bringing a drug through the development process, each team has to have every other team in mind before acting. Clinical development has to be aware of the regulations the drug will have to abide by and coordinate with regulatory affairs. When determining the value of a new medication, we will have to look at the cost of previous treatment and how much value the new treatment will have on a patient's life. Pharmacists have had required training with patient interaction to personally understand how burdensome some drug regimens are. Additionally, pharmacists have key insights into how impactful a treatment could be on the quality of life and potential issues that could arise from infrastructure such as drug stability and transport. The team here at Wolverine Pharmaceuticals, thank you for watching our presentation. We hope that you have enjoyed learning about who we are, but most importantly, we hope that we have conveyed how important our patients are to us and why we believe that our plan would result in better health outcomes for our patients. Thank you.